And you guys might have to click a button that says you agree to the recording.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Got it.
Okay.
There you go.
Cat, kick us off.
See, everyone can hear me fine, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we're beginning an interview here. It's September 18th, 2023. We're recording on Zoom. I'm Pat McPherson, and Susan Creighton and I are creating an archive for the Marlboro Morris Ale, which will reside eventually at the Vermont Folklife Center. And today we're talking to Martha Nolan, member of Rock Creek Women's Morris, who lives in Martha. Speak up. Thank you. So, Susan, why don't you say something so we can hear your voice, so the transcription service can recognize you?
Okay, and I'm Susan Creighton, and I'm participating in this interview with Pat McPherson and Martha Nolan.
Okie doke. I think that's all we have to say. We use a piece of software called Trint, and they have to identify voices at the beginning, speaker 1, 2, and 3. So that's why we had both Pat and Susan and Martha identifying themselves at the beginning. Anyway, Martha, I know you looked at the questions, so you have you have generated some stories, I hope. And let's start with a bit of a personal history. And when did you start Morris dancing?
So my recollection of when I started Morris dancing, I think was maybe the fall of 1975. I don't remember the exact, it was junior year of high school. And it came about after CDSS, I'll call it of New York, because that's what I understood at the time in high school, asked a group of us teenagers at the Round Hill Dance to do a performance square dance at an event in New York. Because I guess there was a big crowd of us at this dance, all from the same high school and all from the same town, let's say. And we did a great job. And then, being teenagers, wanted to learn something else. What dance are you going to teach us next? And somehow our group got sent Tony Poyle. And so I don't have that detail. Others would know more about it. And I believe it was, there's a weird transition here. So I'll be quite honest about it. I understood that he was sent and he was going to teach the men rapper sword dancing. And the key word there's men. And so us women, girls felt, well, no, wait, what are we going to learn? And, wait, what? We're all a part of this. So, and especially if you're going to do it on a Friday night, I think us girlfriends were not happy. And so we felt like we should all be included, right? So ultimately, and I don't remember the exact details, but I do know that we put up a stink as the women, feeling like, well, wait, we should learn something too. And I think back on it now, because I don't think I understood at the time the remarkable nature of the fact that we were asking an Englishman to teach us Morris dancing.
Right.
If you think about it, I didn't realize the significance at the time for, the Morris Ring in England. And so he did. He started to teach us, and he did teach the guys, as you probably well know. The Greenwich Guard was, just a premier rapper sword team that came to the Yale. Basically started performing out. I actually can't remember. I'll let them answer that question. But they came to the Yale in 77. But it is through that transition from performing for CDSS of New York that I was introduced to Morris dancing. As to the exact month, sorry. Right. I do know that we were definitely dancing it by spring of 76, because by the fall of 76, we were doing it together. And then the women wanted to learn some other stuff and create our own little time period. And so we would practice in addition. And so that's why I know it had to be long enough that we had got enough gumption to know that we wanted to pull aside ourselves and ask Tony to teach us something directly outside of the joint practice.
So my understanding of the history at that point is that Country Dance New York would have been like May Gad, run by May Gad still, maybe. Or was it
I think
even
so.
national? Yeah. So they were inviting those English teachers over to, come from the source to really give expert instruction, because people in North America were still just like, what is this stuff we're learning? And so was it a mixed group of boys and girls from the high school?
Yes, because we were dancing. We obviously did a square dance, so we had to be paired at that time, men and women. And so there were enough of us. And I do agree with you about May Gad, because my mom knew the name from growing up in square dancing in her youth in the New York area. So interesting enough, she recognized the whole thing. And yes, so there was men and women. There was probably, there was a group of us. There was enough of us that we had enough for a male, well, the guard and the 6 or 8 of them, and then enough women for certainly a side of women, because we easily created 6 to do our own female side ultimately.
So you had been dancing in the New York area, English country dancing?
No, contra.
Before then?
So I started contra dancing somewhere in 10th grade, I think. I know it was 10th grade, because I got asked to go to a boys' school dance by my best friend. They needed women, and I don't remember who was calling. I don't remember anything about the band. I just remember, sure, I'll go. You're kind of like, okay, I'll do it. Let's all have a sleepover afterwards to make up for the fact that we're doing this, helping out the guys. People I didn't know, school I'd never been to, because it was a private school. It was Andreas's brother, Aaron. Oh, Aaron, who was holding a dance, because he's a year older. And we went, and we all had the time of our lives, and thought, and then of course we all got together at, my best friend's house, chatted about it probably most of the night, and decided that was a thing we wanted to do again. And we found out that there was the Round Hill dances at the Congregational Church, and obviously elsewhere within town, but definitively there, I think once a month or something. And we just became, we just went. And then we started to find each other and became this just group of kids that really enjoyed each other, enjoyed folk music, and very much, you didn't miss a dance because it was just so much fun.
Oh yeah,
Martha,
that's a great way to.
High school for you guys, was that in Greenwich, Connecticut?
Correct, Greenwich, Connecticut.
Okay, yeah.
So all of our dancing was, well, for whatever reason, so whoever the caller was at the Greenwich Round Hill dance that came after this. So after the dance at the boys' school, we ended up at the Round Hill dance, and then we all became quite good, obviously, because we were doing all those teenage things that weren't part of the call. And probably it was Dick Forsher. I don't know. Somebody basically taught us how to swing, and then said, I'm going to make things complex for you. You guys can do X. And then we got pulled aside and just said, we'd really love for you to perform in New York. I may have was him. I don't know that for a fact, because I was not, I was someone who was asked to go. I wasn't leading anything at the time.
That was so great. I love that as a beginning. It
was amazing. The whole thing was amazing, because I was playing a lot of tennis. I was competing in tennis at the time. So for me to even be home, let alone going to a dance, it was a miracle. And so it all, to me, it's thank goodness. Thank goodness for the boys' dance, and thank goodness they needed us. And the rest is history, because I've been dancing for the rest of my life. But we also did square dancing in the public school in elementary school. So it wasn't like it was new, which I don't think they do anymore. And I remember loving that then, even though the boys, of course, took the cootie shot.
Remember? I remember that. Shot, right? Remember? I remember that from elementary school. Right.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Oh my God. So tell us a little bit about the history of then creating that women's
followed from then?
team.
Yeah, what followed from there. So as I
Yeah.
said, the guy, we were all learning together, but the guys were very much more focused on the rapper sword, even though they were learning, we were all learning together, and then we all go out afterwards for ice cream. And then there was just a point where the women just got into talking and deciding that we wanted to learn something together, only us. And the fiddler for the guard is a woman, so she was willing to play for us, and we met at my friend's house. And then we ultimately asked Tony to come and make sense of the Bacon book, because it turns out that this dance we wanted to learn was a heel-toe Sherburne dance. And we weren't sure of how it was supposed to be done and anything. And he agreed and was willing to help us. And so there started these meetings, separate meetings of us, just the 6 women and Michelle playing on the fiddle. And Tony would show up. I don't know if it was every time, but would show up when he could to help guide us. And we would practice and try to figure out what the heck we were doing. And meanwhile, we would also have our joint practices where we would learn, I don't know, Bampton, whatever we were learning, and not Sherburne. So that was happening whenever we could, because of course we were all busy high school kids. And so the way that kind of unfolded is we decided we would be a group, and then we would be, we decided on a name. I guess I was the leader. And we decided to call ourselves the Burgundy Bells, because we all love the color, and in classic, maybe 1970s fashion, or just because we were folkies, I don't know, we all decided to make our entire outfit except the socks and the shoes, which was a challenge. I mean, including the shirts. We were trying to follow whatever we saw historically. It was hilarious. So we had a vest, knickers.
We have some great photos.
Yeah, it really is quite, but we at least, I think I ordered them. We got the bell leather and the bells from England, which the guys did not do. And so we actually were properly outfitted. And then we were getting properly outfitted, because I must admit, this was an interesting spring trying to pull it together when I had already now made this phone call. So the way the story folded, because I know the next question is going to be, how did this all happen? So at some point I heard from my boyfriend that the Greenwich Guard, who was on a guard, right, that they were going to this ale in Vermont. And however he described it, I thought, well, that sounds really cool. Can we go too? And the response was, well, you're going to need to ask the committee. You're going to need, I don't even know if it was a committee. You're going to need to ask Tony Barron. Right. So I got handed his name and his phone number. I don't remember writing. I remember phone call. So all 17-year-old me just finally got the guts to pick up the phone and called Tony and said, that we I was, where I was from, and that I was on a, girls dance troupe, but that I was part of the Greenwich Guard. I explained why I was calling, that I had heard that the Greenwich Guard was going to this ale in Vermont, and we were also dancing with the Guard, but we're doing the Morris dancing, and we wondered whether we could be included in the ale. So the funniest part about this is I do believe Tony then asked me, like, what traditions we danced, which is hilarious, because I think we knew 3 dances. And thankfully it was 3 different traditions of 3 dances. So obviously Sherburne now. And he asked me, what was our basic show dance? And I said, Sherburne Monk's March was the dance that would be our show dance. And that we knew, I don't know, Atterbury and Bampton. I'm not trying to think what Tony was teaching us, but the simple, it might have been Headington, actually. Headington, Bampton, those, the easiest ones you start with, right? And I don't think he thought long about it, because I think he said, that sounds really interesting. I would think it'd be great. Come on up. And I think I got information in the mail. We then exchanged whatever information. I told him the name, I told him the colors, and I needed to then send him the names of who was coming for our team. And so then it became, the usual correspondence at that time in the mail with the ale, or with Tony. because that's all I remember ever talking to. It's just, it was really quite amazing. I totally cold call. And he just thought, okay, whatever, we'll have another, they might come up anyway, perhaps as guests with the team. Why not just have them dance? If you think about it, we were the girlfriends. I think almost all of us were girlfriends of some form. And our musician was the same musician. Yes. So,
So
that
you
was
fell
how we got
into being
invited.
the first squire of Burgundy Bells, basically.
First and only, trust me.
First and only, yeah, right?
Yeah, first and only. The reality was we danced in town, and then we danced at the ale, and then I'm almost positive we got home and you had exams, and I don't know, the summer happened, and we all went to college at different times. So, and we were never back in the same time, other than at maybe Thanksgiving or maybe at Christmas, in which case we were all looking for the dance, not the Morris dance. And I think, it was just this period of time, because most people, very few on the team continued. There are a couple of us that did. Amy Brewer did. I think she ultimately was on Ring of Bells. Kirsten Newcomer ultimately moved to Boston later on in life, joined Halfpenny for a brief period of time. But I think I was probably the only one that's still dancing, that's for sure.
Wow. So, what was it like as a new dancer, relatively, and teenager with your boyfriends there? Of course, that must have been fun. But what was it like being at the ale?
So I think the thing is that most people now don't experience the ale in the same way as we did in those first decade. So one is that you were camping on a slope, probably the most uncomfortable camping I've ever done in my life. Well, that's not true, maybe on a mountainside, but the reality was you slid down in your tent. It was like, it was really uncomfortable. It was a beautiful weekend. Where you had to also bring all your own food and everything. Remember, it was quite the thing. And the field was reserved for dancing. There was a maypole in the middle of it, and all of the teams were assigned a spot around the field. And so when you got up as a mass dance in your spot, and the camera was down, looking down on the field, it really was amazing, because you just had the sea of handkerchiefs going up, and colors and music. So it was magical. It was positively magical. I don't think any of us really slept. I know I didn't. I ended up with mono by Sunday. Unfortunately, ended up in the Brattleboro Hospital. I was a really bad case. But the reality is, I'll never forget it. I still have the pictures. We met a lot of people. So as a teenage team, not knowing much,
Right.
Probably knowing less than the ones that are taught by Tom. I mean, we knew nothing. So when we arrived, and I think that's part of the magic that still needs to happen, is we arrived and we started to learn dances on the spot. So thankfully we had a good grounding, and all of a sudden I'm learning Highland Mary, and you're learning, I don't know what I'd have to think back, but you're dancing and you're trying to get your hands to move in the same way, even though it seemed like our hands went in an English way, which was down when everybody else went up, which then created this hilarity all weekend, because everybody liked to dance with us because they thought it was so funny that we had a different beat based on what Tony taught us. But I probably learned about 10 dances in addition to what I knew over the weekend. I mean, and you just danced like you were in the music area shed, and you danced all night. You just for a group of seniors, I believe almost all of us were seniors in high school, maybe one or two juniors. And loving folk music, loving folk dance, and loving this whole thing. It was magical, just a magical weekend that I still, I can still remember it in my head. I can still picture it in my head, as it was transformational. You just realize what was possible. And it made enough difference to me that when I ultimately moved to Boston and finally got settled in college, and life had slowed down towards, reality, maybe in a month or two, I had that, I wanted to dance. I wanted to continue dancing, but that's a whole nother story from maybe the questions you're asking.
Well, I do want to know what happened in between that magical summer and you basically sort of losing the team, losing the people that you were dancing with because you all scattered to college, right? And how did you keep on dancing, and how did you end up where you are now?
So, what I found at college was, and I was at Harvard at college, so I moved to Cambridge, and I was number one on the tennis team. So we had my competition. I'm saying that because there were high level pressures on me as the student and as an athlete, being a freshman on the varsity and being at the top. And so at some point, I wanted that fun outside of school. It's a lot of fun at school. I'm not saying I didn't have fun, but I missed my folk dancing. And I had the Marlboro pamphlet, which used to get, I don't know what we get now. It's probably in the, QR code, but back then you had and I probably still have it, which is the piece of paper that told me who was on all the teams and the identifying squires or people to contact, a phone number. So when I got to Boston, I had that piece of paper because I knew I wanted to keep dancing. And at some point, I finally got around to making that phone call because I was no longer competing. I was just in practice because it was cold and whatever. And I made the phone call to Muddy River because that's who was at the Ale. And this is why I made that comment earlier. Those that I spoke to at Muddy River, so I'll keep this clean, basically said, no, we don't have room for you. We can't, sorry, no room in the inn. And, but here's the name of another individual who's also looking to dance. And why don't you two talk and form your own team?
Wow.
The other individual at the time was Jan Elliott. I am 18 years old. She is 16 years old. Neither one of us are from Boston. And that's who I was put in touch with, which is why I kind of make the comment that ironically, it took us still a number of months. We had holidays and then I had exams. So it was literally right after exams ended that Jan and I in February had agreed to meet and talk about being able to dance. And
Yeah.
it was the night that the blizzard hit. So we were meeting and then I got home and the blizzard of 78 hit.
I lived in Cambridge then.
It was insane. You were literally you could ski over cars. It was so much snow. It was unbelievable. But all I'm saying is that it was interesting because of the decision then, which I resented then. I can't deny it. I was really challenging by Muddy River to say, we have too many people. Wonderfully, and if you look at it the flip side, because I remember being annoyed for quite some time, that the reality was it created Haypenny. So that night in 78, Jan and I came together, BC and BB were there, Barbara Cannon and Barbara Ben, in this apartment, which I believe was owned by Bruce Pratt. I don't know, that's a detail. I just met them where they told me to meet them. And Jan and I talked through, we all talked through, we decided we wanted to dance and that we thought through a name, we thought through our colors, and then we all just knew we needed to recruit other people. And I think Barbara knew the penny whistle, so we were at least somewhat, but that's how it ultimately, my transition was, I wanted to continue to dance. And the other was, by that time I started to find the contra dances. Found that the contra dances, as you may recall, were at First Congo outside Harvard Yard. I died and went to heaven right there. Oh my God. First Congo, of course, was a fabulous dance. I didn't miss them. I mean, I was basically there at the dance. And then whenever I could, I'd get on that train to Concord and raise my hand for a ride home. And the rest is sort of history. I think I just danced. And Boston is so awesome for all the dances everywhere at any time, including all day events and everything. So that also helped to keep that community and that beautiful community that I just loved.
Right.
Outside of college. I will say, I've often talked to kids about the fact that sometimes having that was a wonderful balance for all that goes on in college. To me, I could escape the pressures, the nonsense, the whatever, and just go to a dance or go to an event with my team or with other teams, obviously, usually with dancing with other teams. And then I taught a lot of Harvard kids that there is this event that happens on May Day morning, and you really ought to get up at dawn because it's right there on the Charles River. Come with me, 5 o'clock, let's go. Some did. Anyway.
Are you still holding in your head the memory of Marlboro and thinking,
Oh, yeah.
I'm thinking, gosh, as we're building a new team, we should probably think about going to Marlboro again. Was that?
Yes, very much so. Always wanted to go back. But I also recognized, again, obviously we weren't ready we were trying to find people to dance with us, that it took us a number of years. And I honestly don't remember the first year that Hey Penny, you probably have that data as to the first year Hey Penny finally made it, but we did make it. And it is your goal. And I knew that at some point. I knew that one of our goals as a Morris team was to be able to get to these events. But also Marlboro started to pull back a little bit because 24 teams, which is what it was, I believe, in 1977, was huge. And it became more, you had to be invited. And it became like you waited, you needed to be basically needed to be invited. And it wasn't like you just could make a phone call. So I feel like I totally lucked out back in 77. He wasn't restricting it, and
Right.
a lot of things were changing and how they were running it and so forth. And so, yeah, eventually you got that phone call. I don't remember making a call to Tony to invite Hey Penny. I remember Hey Penny getting invited is my recollection. And then it's like a badge of honor. You got invited. And I think every team that gets invited cherishes the time, including the English teams that come over even just once. It's an event that leaves an imprint on you, and it's a beautiful one. People you meet, the music, the singing, the friendships, and then all the Morris dancing you learn, let alone the contra dance and the whatever. It really is very special.
How did the first time you went with Hey Penny compared to your experience as part of Burgundy Bells?
Just different in the sense that I knew more dances. I mean, was Pinewood Smith, Shag Greer was helping to teach us all the dances. We were a more formalized structured team. And God knows I just think about high school, we were just pulling it together. And because of that, and I think Jan had some idea of things, and I think the other teams in Boston gave us a sense of structure that Hey Penny was just much more formally created, and was a bigger team, and just different. And then of course I'd already been, so I kind of knew what I was going back to experience. And I remember it just as magical, but I don't know that it was quite the same as just the eye-popping experience in high school. Just wow. This time I kind of knew what I was going to. And so you're just like, I can't wait, because
Right.
you just knew. It's like, to me, sometimes it's like going to the CDS camps. Like you're going to Pinewoods and you're just like July 4th weekend. You better have your energy on because you're going to be dancing all weekend, right? So in this case, you're going to be singing. You're not going to sleep much. You're just going to see some friends. And, oh my God, you can't wait. And you just pray you don't forget anything, including your hankies and bells. I will say one year I left my vest on my bed in Cambridge. Oh my goodness. I didn't barely live that down because I kept having to borrow a vest from a teammate. Like a teammate had to decide not to dance.
On and off, on and off.
Me to dance. I was like, God, what an idiot. Like you never do that twice. But yeah, it was different. I was a little older. I think by that time I might have graduated from college. I just don't remember the year. But it had to have been several years of existence. It had to have been 81, 82, 83, somewhere in there. We might have got invited because I remember going back with the team in 87. By that time I'd moved to Hartford. I remember going back to Marlboro in 87. It was not the first time that we'd gone. And the other interesting thing at that point was those of us on Haypenny decided Haypenny is the one that created the suds. I mean, the foam in counterbalance to the suds. And
Right.
it was a women's gathering that was very important. As the women's movement had been moving through the 70s and into the 80s, and we thought, so the men have the suds. Well, then we're gonna have the foam. We wanted to create a similar name, right? And so Haypenny is the one that started that, and I keep hoping they will revitalize it, because it obviously, I don't know when it stopped, because I kept moving farther south, unfortunately. But
Right.
other teams. So
I just looked it up, by the way. Haypenny first went in 1980
yeah, so my
and went again in 1987, 88, 89, and then a sprinkling of other years after that.
Yeah, I went in 80. I didn't go in 88. I don't know why. But I did go in 87. And I obviously went in 80, which I think is when it was 80. I don't remember when I left my stupid vest. It was terrible. Stupid.
Clearly, you never
Like, you get
forget.
there and you're like it would be like leaving your bells. You're like, oh my God. And so you don't leave town without checking certain things, because you can buy underwear, you can buy socks, but you cannot buy that vest or your ball or whatever it is, right?
You, I don't know you at all, but so I'm like trying to fill in spaces. You have ended up on a different team, Rock Creek.
Yeah. So ultimately, I moved to Connecticut and I looked for a team. Thornhill used to exist. They ironically went defunct, I think the year I moved there. I don't know. They just weren't around. And so I drove to New Haven for a while, which was the New Haven Morris and Sword. That was just a bit complicated, being on a mixed team and learning their traditions, and some of the leadership was a bit challenging. And so I didn't dance for a couple of years, and then I moved to Washington in 1990. So I was still dancing with Haypenny till probably definitely 87, probably into the fall and whatever. And then I just found that drive to Boston not worth it. And of course, because Thornhill wasn't existing anymore. And I don't know why I remember the name, but I do. And then New Haven didn't work out. So then when I moved to Washington, what was interesting was I moved here, and I had a very, very I had a crazy job that had me in and out of airports. I was flying all the time. And but Sally Lackman, who was formerly on Mystic River Garland, was in Washington. She's a good friend of mine, and said, you have to come to practice. I'm like, maybe.
Oh, okay.
And the rest is history, because in 91, that maybe became, you're coming to practice. So there is a hiatus of a couple of years in there where I did a lot of other things, a lot of biking, I have to admit. And then in 91, I came to the Rock Creek practice, and the rest, I'm still here. Yeah, I just, once you start, I don't know what it is. And once I started, and I missed a lot of practice, because of course I was in an airplane all the time. But the reality is, if I was home, Wednesday night was practice, and you just went, and yeah.
Rock Creek is a team which has gone to Marlboro quite a lot.
Yeah. They have a
And
reputation to keep.
I'm sure you have contributed to it.
Yeah, probably.
So let's start talking about Rock Creek at Marlboro. Does your team, I think this is one of the questions I had put down on the list. Does your team have special traditions at Marlboro? Would you say?
You don't mean traditions as in dances, you mean as things that we do.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so, but I think some of that has evolved as the ale has evolved. So like, now that there's the pub and there's the opportunity, you host a session at the pub, or you have your drink at the pub, you might serve it. Rock Creek has always participated in that. We've always been very much a part of the pub scene, and the singing. I can't deny that hasn't always been me, because I'm not a good night owl person. But we are always there, always. And we are, I think, pretty consistently always have a skit or a song on the feast night. It is a tradition. It is expected. It is, and some years are better than others, as we all know. Sometimes, we do better than other years. And, but it's always, we do a skit. And
Is that part of the fun? That's
it is part of the fun. I will say that some years we pull it together out of our, the very last minute. Maybe that's also part of the tradition. Some years were better planned. Some years you're practicing in the dorm, trying to pull it off and figuring out, wait, what props were we doing? And we have some incredibly creative, well, actually all teams have incredibly creative people. And like this last ale, I thought it was hilarious when Barbara Gorin decided we will all be carrying an accordion. And the fact that she owns that many accordions is a crime. And they were all marching in as though we're going to dance with an accordion. Funny. And then we all lined up. We all had to learn I had no idea, how to learn how to do one note. And it was, and that was.
You had a side of accordion players and one dancer. It was so funny. I remember that.
So there was actually, we did multiple skits this past time. So it was pretty, and yeah. So yeah, we have, and I also think that we work really hard to often come up with a new dance for Marlboro, so that it's within our tradition. Often we have the Wheaton under Glenmont, our tradition that was created by Aldona Joseph, and often she writes a new dance for the Marlboro Ale, depending on how many people we know have going. And one year we had at least 12, and we had this amazingly complicated dance that we put together. And it's really cool because it's our tradition. It's not anything. It's literally one that we have written and are doing and are teaching to other teams, and they love them. It's a fun tradition, and I just hope we can keep up our own numbers, that we can go back and do some of those, because some of them really do require 8, 10, 12 people. And there were a bunch of times, actually, Marlboro always had an act or the ale event always had an act for pulling in more people than we necessarily had on tour for some of our local tours. It's always a classic. I think it's true of many teams. So the opportunity to pull off some really cool dancing, which I think we're also known for, to take a normal dance and change it up, is also what Rock Creek is known for, and to do it well.
How have you seen the ale evolve? Yes.
Actually, I wanted to add some point.
Yes.
Burgundy Bells was the first team to do Sherburne, and Tony had never seen the dance we had done. I think you need to know that. So the heel and toe dance that we did at the ale was the first time Sherburne had been performed at the ale, and he had seen it. I just want that
possibly
on the record, that was cool. He wanted to see what we were doing.
Cool.
And then, of course, Sherburne is picked up by other teams, but it was also picked up very much by, I don't know why, but New Haven Morris and Sword very much does. That's just part of the tradition. And it was the only Sherburne dance that Burgundy Bells knew, mind you, was this dance, which of course now everybody knows, but it wasn't known at the time. Sorry.
You also called it Sherburne
Monk's March.
Monk's
March. So now everybody knows what it is.
Cool.
Yeah. Sorry. So your other question, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
How has the ale, since you have observed it over many, many years, how has the ale evolved over the years? It must have affected your experience of it as well.
It has evolved. And I've had so many heartfelt conversations with the committee over the years, probably because I know some of those committee members from high school. It sort of helps, but now a bunch of my my former Rock Creekers are on the team, and I would feel equally comfortable picking up the phone and saying, hey, you know. So interestingly enough, I love the ale, always have loved the ale, but there were some years there where, and I think a lot of it had to do with the structures that we were using and couldn't use or whatever at the college, but we got a little separated. And you had the pub up on the hill, and God knows whatever was going up there, which became really more elitist, and the pickup dancing became very difficult to participate in. It would be one set, and was often, I don't know, whoever got chosen, and was often, and I never found that I could get into the set. It was like a single set performing whatever they wanted to do. And the rest of us were down at the hall, and there was this separation. So even having the contra dance get complicated, because that's also where the beer was, and we were down here. And so you didn't have the vibrant dance anymore. And it got challenging for a number of years. And then I will say what was really interesting was Rock Creek one year said, no, we're not coming. We're going to the Midwest Ale. Now, a lot of that had to do with the fact that we had several members of our team, Crystal and Victoria, and maybe someone else, who were from the Midwest, in addition to other places, but had danced on those teams, and we received an invite through them. And we thought, what the heck? Let's give it a shot. I think it was in Lake Huron, Michigan. So I will say that the experience was hilarious in the sense that it was hard to get to. And then we had a massive thunderstorm where we literally went into lockdown. And unless someone knocked on your door, you were not going to dinner because it was dangerous. It was an experience and a half, being way up in this 2 hours north of Detroit.
Wow.
Up on Lake Huron. We were literally in this Girl Scout camp, Boy Scout camp on Lake Huron. It was glorious. We were all there together. Teams I never met before. Awesome. Meeting new people and so forth. So what was interesting was I had my Marlboro experience again at the ale. And that's what I told the team. I told the committee, Marlboro. When I came back, they were like, they were kind of annoyed. Like, why didn't you come? And I'm like, we didn't come because we had an opportunity to do something different. And now I realize what I'm missing at the Marlboro Ale, which is we don't share dances. We're very separated. And in this dance, we even had an English team there. We were up. I haven't been up like this in forever at the Ale at Marlboro. And I was up till, I don't know what hour, 2 or 3, still doing pickup dancing, Morris dancing, where you'd go up to the committee. Mind you, you needed to give the musicians a few minutes warning to say that you wanted to do God knows what. And then there would be somebody with a microphone shouting at you, and you would have 10 sets of people squeezing in and then laughing hysterically as we all tried to guide each other through a dance that none of us knew, trying to learn whatever it was. Someone was yelling at the front of the room. I don't think I've had more fun in so long. And it was joyous. And I said to the Marlboro committee, you're missing several things. We don't do pickup dancing like that anymore. I don't learn new dances when I'm at the Ale. I'm talking to people. I never learn a new dance at all. There's no pickup dancing. The pub is over there. Meanwhile, obviously it was right outside this dance hall. And the dance hall there was no dance that night. It was just pickup dancing. And we danced and danced and danced. And people were singing outside, drinking, and we were drinking. It was all together. And, you could go off to your cabin and pass out. But nobody wanted to because it was just amazing. And that had to do with age. And this actually has happened at other Midwest ales that I've gone to. And then the next night is the dance, and everybody's at the dance. You're either sitting at the side talking, or you're dancing, or maybe you're asleep. I don't know. But if you're really just talking and bothering people, you're off in another room. And, the singing was in another room because obviously that would be competing, but it was not that far. So you could mix between, and the facilities they choose often allows for that easy flow and for basically everybody to be together. And I said to Marlboro, you got to do something because you're missing the magic, and the magic is therefore not passing on. I'm noticing it now. I now know what in my head I was not putting together that I was missing at the Ale.
Right.
The next generation is missing the magic of what can be experienced at the Ale and isn't, because we're not in the music shed. We're all in the dining hall. And so And I was blunt. I just said, you know, we gotta figure this out, because the Marlboro Ale is the one that designed to have the beauty of this, and you guys have gotten there's too rigid or something. It's too separated, too all sorts of ways. And so, yeah. And I said that to a bunch of people who called me, and I just, you know, I'd still come to the Marlboro Ale, but I will tell you, I'll go back to Midwest in a heartbeat, because they've picked up on your magic and replicated it. You just need to refine it. And I think they're still working at it, because sometimes COVID didn't help, because we couldn't be in the building, right? So now you're in the dark and you're trying to, you know, and so we'll get there. But the reality is that's what's in the Midwest is a little different in some of the ways you do things. So Friday night is really key. Everybody pretty much gets there, and then you're dancing all night, pick up dancing. Saturday night is the dance, and Sunday is the feast. So in the Midwest, it's a little different from the Marlboro Ale in the sense that we're all in the same place for all 3 meals, all 3 nights. Whereas in Marlboro, differently, we are a bit, we would do the dinner in town, and then you'd kind of get separated, and eventually people would come back up to the dance. And it didn't used to be that very early on. We all camped, we all cooked, we were all in the field.
Right.
Right, everybody was there, like you were all in it together. Now we maybe the advent of the dorm room changed some of that. I personally love the dorm room, but if I had to camp, whatever, I'll freeze my butt. But the changing of that might have had something to do with it. I don't know whether I'm just babbling away here, but that I think about some of the dynamics that pulled us apart into different places, because I don't remember until I was on Rock Creek that you had dinner in Brattleboro. I just don't remember it. I feel like I was always driving back to the camp and cooking on the field with even with Haypenny, like you were cooking. And even with Rock Creek early on in the 90s, we were still cooking breakfast and stuff. But then there was these other rituals that were started of in-town eating, and now I feel, to be honest, I feel like we should all pull back to the field. And it's starting to happen. There's a lot more people. I know that I don't eat in town. I pick up whatever at the co-op, and I come back and want to be with everybody on the field Saturday night. And then I don't think we did a dance this last year, but eventually we get there. But that's where the more people you pull back, the more we all are together, the more we're sharing, the more opportunity for stuff.
Yeah. Totally makes sense what you're saying. Geography.
No, I want to make sure it's not a negative. I should say it was a bit of a negative at the time. I'm thrilled beyond all belief that Rock Creek did what it did, because it was great. And we went back when it was in St. Paul in Wisconsin. I'd never been to Wisconsin, so it was kind of fun. I actually wish I'd gone to Chicago. I don't know if I'll ever get a chance to dance to Chicago. And I missed that ale because I went to Marlboro, and we actually split as a team, because there were those that really wanted to go to Midwest and those that wanted to go to Marlboro, and it became an interesting vote. Again, I think a lot of it had to do with seeing those other people. We're now friends with them, and some of our teammates are now living out there, and also that other magic. So that was to me, it was very important for Marlboro to hear our, and I know I wasn't the only one spoken to hear our message, to say, guys, you need to tweak things, because you have it and you're just not using it. And then the pandemic hit, so now all bets are off, to be honest. I mean, in all fairness, this was all pre-pandemic. And I think all of us were so excited to be there. Was it last year? I can't, 21, 22, right? I don't even think I didn't care if there was pickup dancing or dance or anything. I was just so excited to see everybody. And there was so much chatter, like we all just talked. And mind you, because we didn't want to be inside, right?
Right.
So that was interesting. And now we're kind of building back, hopefully. But so the ales had to adjust. But I think if anything, last year's ale had to have told them, how important, how beautiful the community is, how essential our getting together in any fashion is. And we need to keep it alive.
Oh, Martha, you have expressed these things so beautifully.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I also want to say that I know it gets more expensive, and I
Yeah.
think that there is a way to reach out to people to say, you know, if you can pay more to help out those that can't, or if
Right.
your team needs to work it out. We actually have a bag that is designed to help those that can't afford an ale field. I don't know that every team has that. So, or whatever. I also know that the ale is has incurred debt over the years, and it shouldn't do that. It should charge us what it needs at this point, and or keep increasing it to get back what it needs. Because I'd hate to
Right.
have it fail simply because it didn't think it could charge us more. And there are many of us that are old enough to be able to afford a higher airfield to help make up that difference.
Right. We've been talking for about an hour. It's been really great. Is there anything else that you want to make sure is in the archive? A story or a recollection or?
I mean, I think I've told a lot of them. I honestly, I think also what was really cool during my year when I ended up in the Brattleboro Hospital, to my own, well, I'll blame it on my boyfriend too. That they moved the tour, they swung the tour, and they did a dance outside the hospital window.
That is
Ah,
wonderful.
It was very sweet because
And you could
I
hear
was
it from your room.
devastated by, you know, I had 104 temperature. I had no neck. I was a disaster. And obviously my carload had to pack up everything that I had brought and pick me up and get me home. But
oh,
that was just sweet to take the moment. And I think they would do that. I think we've done that. I think it does mean a lot when things happen. And I know that, like, even recently, we did May Day, and we had a fellow FOG who was dying. He has subsequently died. He had a glioblastoma and lived for 5 years. And we May Day morning, wonderful Barbara Gorin said, "Wait, we're going here, but why don't we go there first if they're willing?" We danced for him May Day morning after breakfast at my house, and then everybody's gathering to keep going. And I know it meant the world to him and to his son, who's also a dancer and musician, and to his wife. The sheer joy of the community coming and acknowledging and knowing that he couldn't be with us, so we brought it to him. It's special. Yeah, the whole community is special, as you can tell. It still makes me. And I often tell people, especially if they're folkies, if you're going to college, I'm like, gotta go to college in Boston. OMG, it's just the best place to be. If you're a folk dancer, you can do your college thing and be all serious and party and, you know, get your degree. And then you can have this other fun. It's just the most amazing city.
mhm.
For me, it was perfect. So. But
Oh
for
boy.
jobs, I'd still be there. But jobs took me to Washington ultimately.
Yeah.
So I'm really far away. But it is still one of my favorite cities, and I love New England. So anyway, thank you for this opportunity to tell my
Oh
story.
my God.
And
Thank
I guess what
you.
I would say is also, I
Thank
just think it's really
you.
important. I love what Tom Cruskill's done. I love that the next generation picks up on it and gets exposed to it, because I think it's what's going to keep it alive, because the rest of us are aging. Our knees and hips are telling us that. And we need the teenagers, the 20-year-olds to pick up on the magic to keep it going. Because I
Mhm.
think we'll always be there, but we can't keep dancing the same way. It hurts.
Right.
That's right.
We did talk to Tom Cruskill for that very reason,
He's
because
magical. He's just
how
amazing.
important, yeah, how important what he's doing is. Yeah.
Yes. And actually one of our teammates, Kira Young, who's at GW now, I know we'll lose her probably at the end of her college experience, but she was a Cresco kid and
Well,
also a
maybe
Rebels kid. So, you know, it was just,
it becomes this larger community that,
oh, it does. It does. And actually what's really
Yeah.
funny is I
Yeah.
got to do Lord of the Dance this last year because I knew how I could Morris dance and they needed a substitute. And they like, I was, you know, tag, you're it. I was like, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. And that's a
Hmm.
community too. It's a wonderful community.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, boy. Thank you. You
If you have
mentioned a
any other
lot.
questions or you need to follow up with anything, don't hesitate to reach out.
Right. Right. I was going to
'Cause I
say
know I just rattled on.
you mentioned a lot of names, and I think once we start transcribing, we're going to have to check, you know, how to spell people's names and things like that.
Okay.
All right.